Today we'll be doing the II Sulfate Lab. Let's first begin by prepping for this lab. You will need cupric sulfate, also known as II Sulfate, filter paper, flask, a graduated cylinder, safety, which is goggles and a glove, and a scale. Begin by measuring out 200 milliliters of water and pour it into your flask. Next, you're going to measure out your II sulfate, and you need 20 grams. Make sure you've calibrated your scale so it's accurate. It's important to know your hazard details and the safety needed when dealing with any chemicals in your lab. Observe the properties of II sulfate. Make sure to record your observations. Once you've finished measuring 20 grams of II sulfate, pour into your water carefully. As you pour it into the water, you notice that the water becomes blue. You'll need to stir it carefully by swishing it around. Once you're done, you're left with an aqueous solution of II sulfate, and it's a clear blue.
All right, our first step of our lab was obviously to put on goggles. Copper sulfate is a safety hazard, so we're gonna make sure we have our gloves, our apron, and our safety goggles. All right, step one says you're gonna take your aluminum foil, you're gonna put it into the bottom of your beaker, and we're gonna use our popsicle stick to flatten it down so you can try to get it as flat against the bottom as possible. All right, our next step is to measure 25 milliliters of our prepared II sulfate solution into our graduated cylinder. All right, here we have our 25 milliliters of copper sulfate in our graduated cylinder. All right, the next step is to take your 25 milliliters of II sulfate and you're gonna pour into your beaker over your aluminum foil. You're gonna pour it very carefully so there's no splashing. And we're gonna measure our initial temperature of our solution. You're probably gonna have to tilt the beaker so that the complete red dot at the bottom of the thermometer is covered. All right, with my thermometer, if you look at the tip of the red, you'll notice that the temperature currently is at 22 degrees Celsius. All right, the next step is we're gonna stir using our popsicle stick for 10 seconds. And then we're gonna let it sit still for 30 seconds. All right, our next step is we're gonna take our ½ teaspoon of pre-measured salt, and we're gonna pour it into our beaker with our II sulfate and aluminum foil, and then we're gonna stir for 10 seconds. After the 10 seconds, we're gonna let it sit still for 30 seconds. All right, next we're gonna take our thermometer, we're gonna put it into our solution, and we're gonna measure our final temperature. All right, so we've measured our final temperature, and if you'll notice at the top of the red, it has reached 30 degrees Celsius. All right, next I'm going to pour our beaker of copper sulfate aluminum foil that we've stirred and taken the temperature on into our beaker with a filter paper. You want to pour it slowly so that it doesn't splash up over the edges. Okay, and there is some material at the bottom, so we're going to use our popsicle stick, scrape it down into our filter paper. All right, now I'm going to take our filter paper and I'm going to hold it over a petri dish and slowly unfold. We're going to lay it over so that we can see our precipitate that has been filtered out of our solution.